In this video, we're going to show you simple little TIG welding, stainless steel countertop corners and backsplash corners. Here we go. Chris Winarski back again. Today is March 3rd, 2025. In sunny Dunedin, Florida. Right now it's 68 degrees, high of 74 and low of 61 or something like that. So not too bad. Pretty simple job. We got the countertop broke and we got the hole cut out. Now we just got to weld the corners, 1, 2 on this side, and then this little backsplash that goes right on top of it up like this, and one right there and one on that side. And here's the wood for it, and the wood up here just got to fit over top. And doesn't have to be super critical. If it's a little tight squeeze, they could trim it down a little bit, and if it's a little bigger, that's fine with them, but it should be pretty exact. And after we weld the countertop, it should just slip right on. So done it a bunch of times, and it's not something that's super hard or anything, so take you along for the journey. In this video, I'm just going to show you how I weld the corners up, and then I'll grind it, and then I'll polish it and kind of blend in with the grain and everything. So that'll just be that pretty simple video for today. Add that in for hopefully the weekend. Something a little simple for you guys, so stay tuned. So the first thing I want to do is cut off the paper without scratching it, so I'll show you what I do. And here's one thing you got to be careful of, depending on your brake. It puts a little crease or a mark in there like that. That's why it's good to bend it with paper on it first, but that'll polish right out once they take it all off. If they take all this off, they do it, we don't do it. We offer to do it, but we charge for it, obviously, so they do it. Once they get it all done and everything, they just take their Scotch-Brite pad, like a red Scotch-Brite pad, and just do a once over the whole thing of both of them. So it just looks good in the long run. So that's one final step for them, the customer. It's a countertop place or whatever. But I want to take a little razor blade. Now, be very careful when you do this. I just take a new one and I just float it right on top. You don't want to put too much pressure on. I would practice on a piece of a scrap piece beforehand, so you don't cut through it. You don't want to mark it. But I'm just lightly, barely even putting any pressure on it, just lightly going in. I'm probably only cutting through half of that paper on top, and then I'll just start to peel this off, and you'll see in a second. Really, you don't need to cut it. It just makes it look a little neater, but I just pull it up like that. And this one has a couple little splits in it. That's why it's splitting like that. Then right at that seam, you could kind of see, I'll kind of just tug it and it'll rip it a little bit, which I didn't really get all the way. That's all right. But I got it most of the way like that. It doesn't have to be perfect. If you want it to be, that's up to you. But I'm probably gonna end up peeling it a little bit more off after I'm done welding and grinding that little weld down to polish the top or polish the sides. I probably don't have to polish the top, but we'll see. But that side over there looked a little deeper, so I might just take a little Scotch-Brite or my little tool and try to blend it in a little over here. Sometimes it's just adhesive, but that looks like a little dent in there. Ooh, sorry, in there when it got bent. And same thing over here. I just took that side off and that side, and now I'll just flip it over and kind of get it ready to start welding. So my goal to weld this is I want to fit it up on top of here, which they already are, but I just want to make sure that this fits in pretty good afterwards and kind of have this gap closed in a little bit. But here's where your aluminum chill blocks come in handy, is for stuff like this. I learned this from Roy Crumrine, Crummy Welding, and the Welding Tips and Tricks podcast. Aluminum chill blocks, how handy they are to have. So basically what these do, well, first it's perfect 90 degrees pretty much, and I'll clamp it on there, and that makes it look pretty good. Like, I'll get it to where it looks good and bop it a little bit if I need to, because like sometimes it'll be not super straight, or I'll have to bend it over a little bit, and just depends on how it was broke. So then after that, I'll clamp this on when I'm ready to start welding, and then I'll clamp this standing straight up with like a fireball square or something, and I'll just weld it. And what that block does, if you don't know already, it sucks the heat out of that stainless steel and sucks all the heat into that aluminum block, preventing warping and everything to the stainless steel. So Aluminum blocks work good. Probably the cheapest route, you could go brass or copper, which is even better, but that's obviously a lot more expensive and harder to find. So all depends on what you can find or what you can use. But aluminum blocks like this, anytime I run across them, I would keep them or whatever. We got a bunch here and I saved some at home. We had this one scrapyard by my house that like a few years ago, some machinist used to scrap a bunch of blocks like that, and I just buy them for like $5-10 a block or something like that. And I got a good little stack at home too, so just good handy stuff to have, especially for welding. Like you can use it for anything, just a little arm prop or something when you're going to weld something a little higher, just anything like that. So anyway, we shall get to this. And I already kind of bopped this before the video and everything, but I'll just take my wood and make sure it fits back in. Sometimes if you need to, take a hammer. It doesn't have to be a metal hammer, but like a shaping hammer, but just lightly bop it. Make sure you're not bopping it too much where you're denting it or anything, or putting any scratches in it, but just lightly go at it until you need to. You can put your block in and do a little body work and bop it like that or like this. So all depends, and sometimes your corner has a little radius depending on how it was broke. This side looks like it had a little bit more of a radius, so got my radius on that block right there, and that fits up pretty good in there. Now my corners are pretty good touching and everything, and it doesn't have to be super like perfect 90 degrees and super perfect, just as long as it looks good. If it looks good, it is good. That's what they say. So it doesn't have to be perfect. It's going to go in the kitchen, and in about a week after it's installed, it'll be scratched up with all oil on it, but I still want it to look pretty good and presentable to the people. So check my wood fitment up, and that is like a super snug fit, which I really don't like. I like it to be a little looser, but what they could do is they could just grind this or sand it with the piece of wood with a sander or something. So I think that's what they'll have to do, because this is already starting to be a little out that way, and I don't want to bop it anymore because it'll start to look different. And then same thing over here, it's already starting to, this is like perfect. I could probably bop it out just a hair. It'd give me a little gap on that side, but that's not too big of a deal. So maybe I'll try that and just bend it out just a little to fit that way. And this side looks pretty good. I don't really want to mess with that. So I'll try that, take the wood out, try that, and we'll see from there. And just take note, I'm not no professional countertop builder, so those people might have way better skills and knowledge than I have with this, but I can get it in the ballpark and make it look decent. So I think that's pretty good like that. A little bigger gap, but it doesn't look bad. And if they want, they could sand it down after, or they can even bop it a little bit. But I think we're pretty good right there, and I'll start clamping it up and getting ready to start tacking and welding. And here's our block. What you can do, if you want, you could clamp it like that, and that'll get super perfect. But for how small this thing is, it's probably perfectly acceptable if I just clamp it like that. It just helps suck it out a little bit. It doesn't have to be super critical, but that should be plenty good enough, and that'll help. So now, for me, it's a lot easier just to weld it straight up like this and just put a little weld on it like that, instead of welding it uphill or downhill, putting a little more heat into it, and it won't be as fast if I'm welding downhill or something. So for me, it's easier just to weld it like this. And the best way to weld is from this way to this way, so it's putting more of the heat onto here, where it would warp more if you're welding to this side. But seeing how small that is and how it's set up and everything, I can come like this and weld it like that too. But that's just your better way. But for this, it's not that big of a deal. But if you want to prevent less warping, go from this way to that way. Anyway, got my block clamped up. I clamped it up with the square. You don't need to use a fireball square, but that's just easy for me to stand it up. You could use something like this if you wanted an angle or anything. This is just regular 304 stainless, so I'll just be using 308 stainless steel filler wire, and this is 045, I think, or something like that wire, and we'll get ready to weld it. The machine's set to about, I think it's like 143 amps, but I won't even use anything close to that. I just like to have it up high. That's just me. I'm just gonna tack there, and then I'll put a quick pass on it. For stuff like this, I like to get a little chair if I can. It makes me a little more comfortable. And then I like to fill in this little corner and put a little excess there because I'm going to grind it off after. And this doesn't have to look perfect because it's going to get ground down afterwards, but the better it looks, the easier it will be to grind afterwards. So note that. So that was that, not the prettiest, but you want to also, if you want to wipe off your part with some acetone beforehand or something, good idea. And I forgot to tell you, the most important part is make sure you got some type of ground all the way through this. For me, I usually like to hook my ground right up to the part, but I got this big bulky one from this machine and it's kind of a pain because our everlast is still down. But for now, which I don't like to do it like this, but it's ground down to the table and it's ground to the part like this and ground like that. Because otherwise, if you just have it like this, then your ground could jump a gap or something like that and put a big arc in your countertop or something where you don't want it to be. So something good to note. So just make sure you ground it down somehow. But reason why I don't like to ground it through clamps like that, or I should use my junky clamp, is because it seems like all that amperage that goes through your clamp, it kind of wears it down over time and makes it hard to open. Like this one's really hard to open and everything. I think this was our highly used ground clamp like that, and just everything's so hard to turn because all that current goes through there. So good thing to remember. Go switch it out. Green for ground. That's our designated ground clamp. To this side, all tacked up, ready to start welding, or all fit up, clamped up, ready to start tacking and welding. Now here I'll be welding the right direction too, from this way to the thick spot, but that doesn't really matter. I turned my machine down to about 88 amps. That was kind of a lot. So I'll just show you how, I don't know, maybe turn the amps down or whatever, but this one looks better than that one. I don't know if it was from not having to put as much heat or whatever, controlled as much going that way, but just want to make sure you have no fish eyes or anything and have enough wire or like everything in there, enough weld in there, so when I grind it down I don't have to put more on it. But it looks pretty good. Probably hard for you to see. Not too hot, so I think we're pretty good. And that block's getting pretty warm, sucking some of that heat out. Same thing with over here. Doesn't have to be purged or anything, and the color doesn't have to come out on the inside because it's gonna get clamped down and no one's ever gonna see it. So that's good. I'm gonna weld that and then I'll grind them all down after. And double check, the wood fits in pretty good, so that's good. If they need to, they could shave it down a little, but I think they'll be good. Then for this one, it's a little broken out. I don't know if you could see, you're on the tripod, so see that little gap like that in between there? So it's a little out like that. So I'm gonna try bopping it just a little bit, make it a little nicer. I pull it, make sure it looks pretty good. Looks pretty square that way, I think. Same thing over here. This is a little out that way too. Hard to see, but it's a little bit out that way. Looks pretty good when we put that in, so just clamp those on and get them ready to weld. I tried clamping it and it worked pretty good, so definitely a lot easier if you could just weld it like this. Go shoop, and then come around like this. And it's better to weld from that way to that way, but for this it's not that bad. But got my blocks clamped into there. Same thing over here. And I think that's pretty good. And after you tack it, you can bop it a little bit more if you need to. That'll hold it a lot better. So, ready to go. Honestly, a pretty simple job. I mean, it's hard to, you can mess up on it, but even if it looks ugly to weld, you're still gonna grind it down, but you just want it to look good, and just don't put too much heat into it is the big thing. Forget, take your acetone. This is just a acetone in an old dish soap bottle. So there you go. Welded, it'll get ground, and I like to put a little extra dab of wire there if it's a little undercut or a little under welded, just so I'll take a little grinder and put a little flat on it, and just has that little extra to it, and make sure there's no fish eyes. And then with this, I tacked this side first, and it was a little high. After I tacked it, I bopped it a little, brought it to where it needed to be. If I would have put a clamp going down this way, it would have been fine. So you can see where I got that little gap right there, where it's not sucking the heat out as much. The tighter you get this, the better it will suck the heat out and everything. But for what that is, it's perfectly fine and acceptable, and it's definitely a lot better than nothing. I could feel a lot of heat into this part already. Not a lot, but a little bit. So that's it for that one. And over here, same thing. Got that pretty good. A little dab over there, a little dab over here. No fish eyes. Block's a little warm. So now we could start grinding those and check our fit up on this. But I'm pretty sure we had a little extra slop on this, so I think we're pretty good on that. I got that on the table ready to start grinding. Now I'm going to start off with a flap disc, and I'm going to try this new one first. This is like a Lehigh Valley flap disc. I don't know how many grit that is, but maybe I should check that. Kind of cool out of the shape of it. It's unique compared to a normal one like this. So we'll see. When I grind this weld down, I want to just grind it about 90% of the way. I don't want to try not to touch this metal if I don't have to, but I probably will. That way I'll go over with a different disc to get it a little closer after that. I'll show you my little tool selection right now. This was 36 grit, which was kind of aggressive, but I might try it out. This is 80, our normal ones. And I could use a regular grinder too if you don't have that. Then I like to go to this afterwards. After I get it like most of the way with this, I'll switch over to this, and this gets it pretty good. And then I want it to start developing the grain, and I'll use something like this or this on like a drill, and it works pretty good. And then after that, I'll probably just go by hand with a regular Scotch-Brite, like a hand Scotch-Brite, like that, like a red or green, and that works pretty good. Slow and steady kind of wins the race with this. You don't want to heat up the metal too hot, because it just, you could tell when it gets too hot, it changes colors a little bit and just not good, and it really doesn't start cutting down the metal more. So just be careful, go a little bit at a time. All right, so we got that pretty good with that red wheel, and that was a little aggressive, but it might be a little harder to get the scratches out with just this. So that's one thing you got to remember. The deeper you go or the more aggressive you go, the harder it is to get the scratches out. Now you can see how I flip the thing. I like to grind like going like this. I don't like to, like how it was like that. I don't like to go like that. It feels like I put more scratches in that way. So I'd flip it over and make sure I don't know, I'm grinding that way. For me, it's a little easier, if that makes sense. Like, try showing you on this. So it's easier for me to get that little bit, where if I'm trying to grind that end like that, it's easy for me to put more grind marks going this way. So where if I just flip it and kind of, I don't know if you can see that, do it like this and just get that last little bit right there, it's a little easier. So just me, something I learned along the way for myself. So now we'll go at it with this and we'll go from there. So this is just like a Scotch-Brite wheel, roll-lock wheel, whatever they call them. But same thing, just go a little bit at a time. Don't get the wheel too hot. Kind of glazes over if you get it too hot. Okay, so after this Scotch-Brite wheel, this is what it kind of looks like. I already did this with a different one. But I'm not trying to get all the color off, because that's all flush and everything, so I don't really need to. I'll get that with my other wheel. So I'm just trying to take all the scratches out, really. And same thing with over here. Just trying to get all the scratches out. Now, one thing, if you can, I just want it to look neat and be like nice and consistent, no dips in it or anything. That's my main goal. If you can with this, like when I do it, the wheel's going like this, which the grain's going up like that. So it's kind of going against the grain. So if you want, you can turn the wheel like that. It would make it a little easier to put the extra grain in. But like this one was fine because that's going like that when you flip it and everything. So one thing to keep track of if you want, makes it a little easier in the long run. So now like this, I got my grain going like that, and I'll have to polish it up and down like that. But I think we'll be able to get it. So my next step is this wheel. These little Scotch-Brite wheels with a sander disc, and I put it on a drill. If you have like a variable speed die grinder, it works pretty good. This one, this isn't powerful enough, and same thing with that other one. It's not powerful enough for that thing. So drill works pretty good, and I like these ones better, how the sandpaper's closer to each other compared to this one. This one's a little more aggressive, but that's just what we ordered. We tried a different abrasive manufacturer, whatever, and we got these ones, so we're just going to use these ones up. So I tried it on this, and it's working pretty good, actually. So I think that's pretty good. So look at that, not bad. And just with the hand Scotch-Brite, that should be pretty good after that. One thing though, just to go over and talk with your customer beforehand is that like let them know or what their expectations are, because if they want it better than this, sometimes it may cost more money or it may take time. So just ask them what they're looking for. If they're just looking for like good, like pretty good or whatever, like that looks like fairly decent quality, which is what this will look like, then it'll be a lot more affordable. But if they want it super perfect factory polished with everything to blend perfectly, then it might cost a little more, because you're gonna have to peel all this off and you're gonna have to blend it all down, and it's gonna take you probably like another hour to do all this or so, or half hour if you have the right tools. So just know that that's a good thing to discuss with your customers beforehand or afterhand, whatever. Beforehand is probably better, and just get like a little, if you have like a little sheet metal, and just polish it and say, hey, this is what it'll look like, a little scrap piece or something, and just so they know and you know. And it's actually a lot better to communicate like that, so good thing to do. So like this will be plenty good, plenty whatever, it looks good right now, but with that hand Scotch Brite it'll look good. Then once they install it, they'll just give it a quick little wipe over if they have any other spots, and it should be plenty fine and good. So just one food for thought for everybody. All right, let's see, brain's going that way. One thing you got to remember too is it gets hot, so you don't want to like get too hot, otherwise it starts melting this and it just doesn't work as good. Too much heat kind of glazes over your abrasive, so that's not good. And then for your metal, if it gets too hot too, it kind of heats it up too much, turns it like a different color where you can see it, and it just kind of like hardens it, where you have to let it cool down to go at it again. So that's pretty much it. Don't cross-contaminate your wheel, so use this abrasive for stainless steel only, and this is a to be finished, the polish on this metal too. Perfectly fine, but I'm going through this, and above where I had the paper peeled off, see, I peeled the paper back a little bit more to blend it in a little bit more, and I found a little tiny indent, and I went over that, and it's kind of hard to get the whole thing out, but that's just one thing that you gotta watch out for. But stuff like this is could get dented from moving around, or when they broke it or something, that little thing happened. You could still see it a little bit, but it's not going to come out. Like, I'm not that good of a body person with that, but it's perfectly fine for what they are. They're happy with, like, it's acceptable for them. That's what we already discussed with them. Like, we told them this is a long-term customer that we had for a while, and told them, like, if you want to be perfect, then we're going to have to pay the supplier people, like the metal supplier people, more money, or find a different person to take extra care of the material and everything, and we'll have to take extra care of it just so you don't get that, because that's super easy for it to happen. And then like same thing over here, like who knows if there will be something else when it came in. Like, we try to be super careful with it, but could have came like that from when we got the sheet, or when it got broke, or from the metal supplier who really knows, because you couldn't really see that until I peeled up the paper, and who knows on all this. So one thing to think about, and that's one reason why you got to ask those questions, because if they want it to be super perfect, you might have to charge more for it. But for what that is, it's perfectly acceptable, and it's really not that bad. I probably made it look a little more noticeable from blending it a little bit more. But anyway, try getting a little bit more with this tool, and we'll see from there. And just like that, I peel up the paper a little bit more, and what do you know, you get a little extra one. So see, that's one thing you have to discuss. So this, I don't know, we'll probably call the customer in when they pick it up and see if they want us to do anything over with it, but they'll probably be happy with it. But just frustrating like that, how we try to be perfectly careful with it, and it was someone else along the way that happens, and it doesn't look like it until you peel up the paper. So what I do is I just peel up the paper a little bit more than what I had it, and I'll just lightly blend everything together a little bit. Don't go overboard, and make sure you're going with the grain, and just makes it look a little better. So I think that one came out pretty good. What you think? And that's all just adhesive on there that comes right off. So pretty good. So do that one that side, and we'll worry about that one after. I think I got them all to an acceptable point. You can still see a slight little bit, but we'll let the customer know about that. But I think we are perfectly fine with that. You can see a little bit in the video. I see a lot more in the video than in person. But we'll show it to them. I think it's just so deep that where if I keep going at it, it's going to be too deep, and it's going to take a lot of work to get that out. Or you could probably knock it out with a hammer and dolly, but I'm not that good with it. Sometimes I put a dent in there. I think it's good. We'll go over that with the customer. If they want us to work on it more, we will. But I think it's acceptable. And sure enough, I found One, two, there was three in that and one on that side. This looks really good though, I think. I mean, that corner, those corners came out pretty good. And I think this grain and that grain is two different, well, they're definitely two different suppliers or something, where this grain was a little coarser and a lot easier to work with. But that came out pretty good, I think. This one came, I mean, he still came out pretty good, but just had a little dent in it. I could still see a little dent somewhere, but I think that's it. That's how you discuss your acceptableness with what the customer wants. Otherwise, you could spend too much time working on it, I guess. So if they want it super perfect, you got to charge for perfect. If you want, if they're okay with acceptable, it'll be a lot more acceptable prices. So that's one thing. I learned that from Welding Tips and Tricks podcast too. And really good thing to discuss though, because sometimes you can spend an hour, 2 hours on working on all that, trying to make it perfect, where it doesn't even matter, or the customer doesn't even want to pay for it or whatever. But sometimes you can't charge for that, but just something to think about. So I checked my fitment up on this piece of wood and we were good. We were good on that. So I'm just going to tape it all up and I think it's ready to go. So I'm not no kitchen countertop expert. I do this like a couple times a year or so with these countertops for the same customer and a couple other people, but nothing professional. Like, I'm not no countertop guy or anything, or polisher or anything. I just learn as I go over the years. So let me know how you guys liked it. Don't forget to subscribe. I'm close to my 1,000 subscriber mark. I'm at like 820, 830 at this time of this video. So I thought it would be a quick video for you guys, but I think it's long again. But don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and let me know how you guys would change it up or do something different. So thank you for watching. Chris Winarski, over and out. Kitchen countertop, ready to go. Had a little weld right there and blended it down. How does that look? Not too shabby, I guess. Same thing with over here. This one never fails. You always get a little dent whenever you peel the paper up. But that one's a little less shabby, but still acceptable. Same thing over there. And here's your piece of wood, just to show you it fits up pretty good on that piece of wood. Not too shabby.